In any highly polarized debate, I always look for what do both sides secretly agree on without knowing it? What premise do they share? What assumption do they share that's actually at the crux of resolving the issue? And you named it. With COVID-19, we could get into the war of the dueling studies here, where I pull some out that's like, what about Ivory Coast? What about Nigeria? And you're like, oh yeah, well, what about Brazil? And like, what about Sweden? That whole conversation assumes that, like, even if, say, I'm an anti-masker, anti-vaxxer, not that I ever would actually be one of those, but let's just say that I am, and I focus the debate on that. I'm saying, if you're right, then yeah, we should lock down, we should distance, if necessary, forever.
Right.
Because I'm agreeing with the premise that if it saves lives, we should do it. But like, I like to ask people, if you could increase your life expectancy by 5 years at the cost of never having a hug with anybody outside your household again, never going in public again, never traveling again, never singing with other people again, never going to a festival and dancing with others again, would you do it? 5 years, would you do it?
I mean, I don't know how many years you would have to take off my life for me to agree to that premise, right? I mean, but that goes again. So then we're talking about, since you asked that question, personally, for me, I don't understand death. My story of death is far different than the story that a lot of people have. I feel like, and this is my own subjective belief, through my own journeys, I feel like I understand, truly know that my essence, call it your soul, call it whatever, moves on and life continues even as my body decays.
Right.
And so I don't have this terrifying fear of death. I know that I'm here to live and help everybody else live, really capital L fucking live, no matter what. Mm-hmm. Even if the meteor is coming, like, all right, maybe we can create some Armageddon scenario where we put a nuke in the meteor and split it in two and Bruce Willis saves the day. Great, go for it. But in the meantime, let's fucking throw Burning Man's every month.
Right.
Let's live. Let's really live.
And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, on one level, validating that seeing each other's faces is important, that hugs are important, that gathering is important. Because right now we have a public health calculus that diminishes all of those things, that holds safety as the god of our civilization. When I was in the airport, man, safety, keep safe, keep safe, keep safe. Our number one priority is your safety. Like, are we here on Earth in order to survive life? It's like what you said. Ultimately, all of this denies that we're going to die someday. Like our story, our dominant story, it doesn't say that you're never going to die, but it implies that if you, it's irrational, but it implies that if you could control the world enough, then you'd never die. And if that were true, then it might make sense to keep as safe as possible. But when you understand this, the other part is when you understand that your time here is finite, no matter what, and that you are more than this separate self, then priorities change. And you'll no longer, the irony is that when you live at the altar of safety and trying to prevent death, you also prevent life. You don't fully live.
It's like when you armor to protect yourself against pain, you also armor to protect yourself against love. Like,
right.
There's no filter that you can set up that right. actually works with both. It's universal, one way or the other.
Right. And this is the core of the mythology of our civilization. It is that who you are is a discrete, separate self. It assumes that when somebody is suffering in the world, that there's some part of me that's not suffering. When there's poverty outside, that I'm not in some way poor. It assumes that I can fully insulate myself from the world, and if I can control what's outside of me effectively enough, then I will thrive. And our whole civilization is built on this myth of the separate self.
Personally, I trace it back to the ego. The ego, which is, ego's translated as I am, but really what it is saying is I am not. It is the part of us that is actually designed to create separation. My story being that we all come from source, and I've connected to that source through a variety of different practices, felt it in my body, understood what unicity feels like in every cell of my being. And so, but we need something to navigate, some way to learn, some way to understand each other and have separation experiences. And that's part of the joy of this game, is to find self in another and embrace them and learn more about yourself through that other self, or find self in a tree or in a cat or whatever you want to do. You find another thing that you can interact with. But the ego's job is to create enough separation to say, so we don't just merge back into the same place where we came from, which isn't as interesting a game. So the ego is saying, I am not, but it needs to have the natural check and balance of the soul aspect of who we are, which says, I am everything. I am, instead of I am not everything, there's also another part that says I am everything. And then it's the dance between those two working in synergy, which creates like a really vibrant human experience. But the way that our culture has gone, it's been so ego focused, partly because of the repression of all of the practices that allow you to feel that sense of unicity, that sense of, oh, wow, I really am connected to everything. But we've been on this runaway train of the ego to the point where we really identify only with the ego. And as you wrote in that story where the ego, your identity is everything, death is the ultimate catastrophe because it is the end of that thing.
Right.
You merge back to everything, which if you know that you're going to merge back to everything, it's like, well, did I enjoy it? But if you don't know that, if you don't believe that, then it is the catastrophe. It's the end of your finite game because you don't really believe in the infinite game.